Hey writing gang, welcome back for some more fun writing help. If you saw my last interactive video where I dare you to have fun writing, you would have started with protagonists. Today, I'm going to dare you again. Go ahead, pick up a pen, grab a notebook, and write a story with me. The topic of the day is going to be conflicts. Now, the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what is conflict? In a story, conflict is the force that generates tension, and tension really drives a story. Try to imagine, if you can, a story without tension. Everything goes alright for everybody. There's no conflict. The end. That story would be happy, but also pretty damn boring. It's also not realistic at all. Nothing in life goes that smoothly, and you'll find the more you write and do these activities with me, one of the most important parts of writing a story is that readers can see themselves in it. They need to believe it. Otherwise, they remember, wait, I'm reading a book, and then they shut it. The truth is, we need a little conflict to appreciate what we have. When we work hard for something, we struggle, we even fight for it, that's when the real victories happen, and that's what makes a good story. If you haven't already, grab something to write with and something to write on to do 3 interactive activities with me throughout the video to help you come up with a conflict for your story. Activity number 1 is going to be to pick a goal for your protagonist. Now, I know you're probably already thinking, hey, you tricked us. You already covered protagonists in another video. Today, our topic is going to be protagonist. Don't worry, we're not going to go into the specifics of what your protagonist's personality is going to be. If you need more help specifically working on your protagonist, click on the card up here to see my video about that. But for the purpose of a conflict, you need to pick a goal for them. Now, when you pick this goal, something you should keep in mind is that this is going to be the climax of your story, when your protagonist either achieves the goal or falls short of it and learns a hard lesson. You can pick any old goal for your protagonist, but I advise not making it something too easy to obtain or something too simple. This can lead to really unsatisfying conclusions. Their goal should be something with some emotion attached to it. Imagine how unsatisfying an ending would be where the main character finally gets the donut he was looking for. Unless he went through extreme turmoil to get this donut, or you're writing a parody like Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, it's not a good goal to build a conflict around. In a second, you're going to see a pause screen. That's where I invite you to pause the video and actually write down some drafted ideas for what your protagonist's goal is going to be. I'm going to do the same thing in my notebook, but I'm going to try and come up with a terrible example of a goal for a protagonist to give you an idea of what not to do. Welcome back. Hope you had fun drafting your goal for your protagonist. Now I'm going to share with you my terrible example. So in my example, my protagonist's name is going to be Madison Math Spain, and appropriately for her, her goal is that she wants an A in algebra. Poor girl doesn't realize there are already 2. Now there are a couple reasons why this goal is not going to lead to great conflict for Madison. One, this is a pretty simple thing to remedy. She needs to study, she needs to learn the skills she's short on. It doesn't lend itself to great scenes. Imagine watching this playing out. Madison poring over books in the library, Madison seeking out a tutor. It's really not all that entertaining unless you throw in some absolutely crazy twists. There's really no emotion attached to it. Is she failing out of school and she needs the A to stay in? Now that would be a more engaging story. But in this scenario, Madison just wants an A in algebra. The satisfaction at the end is going to be she got what she wanted, the end. Hopefully your example was better than mine, but I'm going to go back and redo the activity because editing is important. In Madison Math Spain, The Second Coming, we see that her goal has changed a little bit. Now Madison needs an A to get into the college of her choice. Not only that, but this is how she's going to prove to her mother that she's not a failure. Now this is a good goal to drive a good conflict. You can put all sorts of roadblocks in Madison's way here. Maybe math isn't her strongest subject. Maybe her algebra teacher really doesn't like her. All those things are great points of tension that are going to prevent her from getting an A and force her to be creative to achieve her goal. You can also see there's a lot more emotion behind Madison's intentions this time because she wants to prove that she's not a failure to her mother. This opens up the door of backstory and character development. Now you've decided on a goal for your protagonist, it's time to get your villain's hat on. That's right, real villain of every story is the author, not the countless antagonists that stand in the main character's way. Because who creates them? Who puts these people in their way? You do. But that's okay, because it's fun being bad. Like I said earlier, the fun of a story comes from the struggle, and it's your job as the author to put those struggles in your main character's way. Before we can get too specific with the conflict, you'll need to pick the type of conflict. Now, if you watched my previous video about protagonists, you've probably already picked a loose framework for a conflict. You can use that one or abandon it to create a new one here. The three main types of conflict you have to choose from are man versus man, man versus nature, man versus self. Women don't have conflicts in their lives. If you pick a man versus man conflict, then what you're going to do now is come up with the basic idea for an antagonist. That's going to be detailed a lot more in a future video, so for now, all you're going to pick is your antagonist's name and choose how this antagonist is going to bar your main character from achieving their goal. It's worth it to note that even if you pick one of the other two conflict types, there usually are some minor antagonists involved just to keep the plot moving. When thinking of man versus nature conflicts, adventure, fantasy, and dystopian stories tend to come to mind. This is when the protagonist's biggest obstacles to their goals come from the environment around them, be it their social environment or the natural environment. As I said before, there might still be minor antagonists involved in these stories, but they really only serve to enhance the threat of the environment to the protagonist's goal. If you choose a man versus nature conflict, now's the time to pick how their environment will inhibit them from reaching their goals, either their social or their natural environment. Man versus self can be a bit tricky to write, but also can lead to some really interesting conflict. This is when the protagonist is really their own biggest threat to achieving their goal. This lends itself really well to psychological thrillers and mind-bending stories. Again, in this kind of conflict, there might be minor antagonists that are external, but the biggest threat blocking the protagonist from achieving their goals is going to be themselves. If you pick a man versus self conflict, choose one aspect of your protagonist's personality that would make it harder for them to achieve the goal they've set. Now it's time for another pause screen and an example. So take this time to pick one of the three major types of conflict and choose one of the details I discussed about whichever one you picked. I'm going to work with the man versus man framework for my example. Madison Mathbane is a woman, and therefore faces no roadblocks. Kidding aside, I'm a serious advocate for strong women in fiction. Check out the article in the description. I actually included that as one of 3 things to try to avoid creating strong women who really just have habits that are perceived as manly. Strong is a sense of character. The real antagonist in this man versus man conflict is going to be Madison's teacher, Mr. Garitham, first name Alex. He used to date her mother. This ended badly, so he plans to kill her. Now, there's a couple reasons why this is a horrible antagonist for this story. Remember, Madison's goal was just to get an A in math. If you bring in murder to the mix, this completely changes the emotional balance of the story. Her goal now should be just to stay alive, and has very little to do with proving to her mother she's not a failure. Believe it or not, in example 1, we had the beginning of a good antagonist for the story, just went a little awry with the murder plans. So in this better example, Mr. Garitham still dated Madison's mother, and it still ended badly. Now he's made it his life's mission to fail her in his class for revenge. There's a couple reasons why this is a much better example of a good man versus man conflict. This is going to pit Mr. Garitham against Madison in so many different situations. It's going to be more of a game of cat and mouse to see who comes out on top. Madison getting into the college of her choice and getting the emotional satisfaction of proving her mother wrong, or Mr. Garitham, who ends up failing her and ultimately getting his revenge at long last. Activity 3. Now you're going to choose 3 roadblocks to put in your protagonist's way. You've already done most of the legwork on this one. You built a solid framework by choosing a goal for your protagonist and choosing the type of conflict. Now you're going to take those 2 things and use them to come up with 3 times where your protagonist is going to struggle to achieve their goal. They may overcome these struggles, or they may fall short of them and learn a lesson from it. But you won't have to choose the specifics of that in this video. All you're going to choose here are 3 times that your protagonist has to struggle to achieve their goal. Just to give you some examples, If you chose a man versus man conflict, you're going to choose now 3 times that the antagonist inhibits your main character from achieving their goal. If you chose man versus nature, you're going to choose 3 times the environment prevented your main character from reaching their goal, and so on. You don't want to make these situations too easy to overcome, otherwise they don't serve as real roadblocks, and they just make the main character seem invincible and therefore unbelievable. One horrendous example coming right up after the pause screen. So, in this title match of Madison versus Al for the title of Algebra Champ, here are 3 roadblocks that stands in our main character's way. Number 1, Mr. Gorhythm burns Madison's notes. This really isn't a great roadblock for Madison on her way to her goal because it's really easy to circumvent. She can just borrow the notes from someone else and copy them down. It really just shows the antagonist as a huge jerk. Number 2, Madison decides to be a musician instead. Now this would completely re-gear the conflict, being more of a man versus self story. If this really were something that happened in the story, Madison would be struggling with her drive to succeed in math or be a musician. She would bounce back and forth. And that would be a completely different story than Madison trying to prove her mom wrong about her being a failure. Roadblock number 3. Madison gets expelled for trying to change her grade by hacking. Now, this kind of defeats Madison's motivation. She wanted to prove her mother wrong. She wanted to show she wasn't a failure. Even if she succeeded in changing her grade by hacking, she would always know, deep down, that she did fail. She just cheated. None of these roadblocks really help support the conflict we set up earlier. Here are some better roadblocks to help fuel Madison's conflict with Mr. Gorhythm. Number 1, Mr. Gorhythm loses her tests and frames Madison for skipping class. Now, this would really show, if he could pull it off, how crafty Mr. Gorhythm is and deepen his profile as an antagonist. Number 2, Madison can't find a tutor in time for a test. This brings supporting characters into the mix and also increases the tension, putting sort of a time clock on the story. 3, Mr. Gorhythm uses obscure school policy rules to send Madison to the office. Again, this shows Mr. Gorhythm's creativity as an antagonist. Maybe he pulls up a rule about the certain color scarf she's wearing, one of those rules that no one enforces, and he gets her out of the room so she misses valuable instruction time. All 3 of these roadblocks set Madison back, but they are able to be overcome with determination. There you have it, gang. 3 great activities to help you build a conflict for your story. You're going to start by choosing a goal for your protagonist. Then you're going to choose from the 3 main types of conflict. Use that along with your protagonist's goal to come up with 3 roadblocks to put challenges in their way. Do these things and you'll be cooking up a great conflict in no time. People who have seen my other videos would tell you the most important aspect of any story is change. The characters have to change. And conflict is the mode by which we change them. Just like in real life, you get the hell beaten out of you and you change. If you like this video, hit subscribe for more fun writing help. Other times where I dare you to have fun writing, other writing recipes, crimes of writing, all kinds of fun stuff on the way. Roadside Writer, out.